are longtime precious metal investors in gold and silver and the Gold Antitrust Action Committee finally going to get what they've wanted. So yesterday the story broke on Bloomberg, as you can see there on your screen, that two sources close to the bank, two people familiar with the situation, that U.S. authorities, I guess this is the Trump administration Department of Justice, are now rolling up these 6 JP Morgan Chase employees accused of, well, actually they've already pled to guilty of precious metal spoofing and a bunch of other fraud cases. And RICO has gotten involved. So I'll talk about RICO in a little bit. But first, let me, if you're a foreign listener, you're not familiar with the U.S. legal system, U.S. justice system, I'll talk about what RICO is. So let me just read the article first. Came out yesterday on Bloomberg from Tom Schoenberg and Liam Vaughn. JP Morgan's role in metal spoofing is under U.S. criminal probe. U.S. authorities that accused 6 JP Morgan Chase & Company employees of rigging precious metals futures are building a criminal case against the bank itself, two people familiar with the situation said. The previously unreported investigation of the global bank's parent company, part of a wide-ranging federal clampdown on market manipulation, raises the prospect of criminal charges against and significant fines, against America's largest bank. Hallelujah! We've been waiting for this for a long time. Long time. So there were hints at this in December 13th, I was doing research on this. I found this article pretty shortly after it came out, and it was from a legal blog, JD Supra, and I emailed it to Christopher Powell over at GATA, Gold Antitrust Action Committee, and this guy was looking through the legal filings of the JP Morgan traders that were pleading guilty and looking at RICO. And normally what happens with RICO, and if you're not familiar with RICO, the RICO laws were created in the 1970s to get mobsters. And there's a lot of charges. I'll read the RICO definitions in a little bit, but let me just stick with this. So the RICO was designed to stack a bunch of felonies against the lower level people in the mob back then, and then get them to roll over on the higher level people. So that's how they would build, the U.S. federal government would build cases against the mob back then. And it appears that this is the similar case that's been going on for the last 12 months now with the JP Morgan traders. So the JP Morgan traders were pleading guilty to a number of, spoofing and market manipulation. They were lower level crimes, as Bill Murphy of GATA, Gold Antitrust Action Committee, and Chris Powell have said, that the spoofing manipulation part is just a tip of the iceberg for paper price manipulation for gold and silver. However, it got the U.S. government, the Department of Justice's foot in the door, because once you start throwing felony criminal charges at these guys, most of these guys are used to a cushy lifestyle, and going to a white-collar prison for a long time is not really something they want to do, so they're going to start rolling over, especially if you start building a case with a lot of these guys. So RICO is very serious stuff, because once you start getting a bunch of people arrested, and you have 6 JP Morgan traders already, including mid-level management, arrested for that, then you can start building a case against the bank. So this blog that came out on December 13th, it was talking about how the Department of Justice and the CFTC are building a very large RICO case. And at the time when I emailed it to Christopher Powell, he was this was back in December, early December. He was mid-December, actually. He was very, very skeptical. And I was like, well, I was looking through some of the legal documents back then, and then I read this article, and I was like, this guy is citing it that the government is really serious about this stuff. Because the guy who wrote this blog article was talking about these RICO cases are all stacking up, and they're building the evidence for a much larger case. So it's going to be very interesting. Let me go back to the Bloomberg article now. So the previously unreported investigation of the global bank's parent company, part of a wide-ranging federal clampdown on market manipulation, raises the prospect of criminal charges and significant fines against America's largest bank. No formal accusations have been made against JP Morgan yet, which means the federal government is waiting. So they're probably crossing all their T's and dotting all their I's. But if this story hit Bloomberg, the charges are coming. There's going to be massive fines and probably charges. A bank spokeswoman, Jessica Francisco, declined to comment and pointed to company filings from last year, disclosing that the Justice Department's criminal division was investigating trading practices in the metals markets and related conduct. How the probe proceeds from here is likely to be watched closely. Relatively few big bank prosecutions have come to light during the Trump administration, compared with a spate of big penalties and guilty pleas for banks under President Obama. Oh, I love the spin here saying that Obama was tougher on the banks. What a crock of shit. What a crock of shit. Obama bent over backwards for the banksters, too. My God, this is ridiculous. Unbelievable how these asshole journalists spin things. The Justice Department declined to comment. Of course, they're not going to tip their case right now. Investigators at the Justice Department and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission are at least 2 years into their examination of trading on JP Morgan's precious metals desk, one of the people said. And this investigation, notice, as soon as Gary Gensler, who Ted Butler believed in way too much, as soon as Gary Gensler left, the case started to build. U.S. authorities have already... Well, actually, Gensler left years ago. My bad. Gensler was Hillary Clinton's campaign finance manager for 2016. So not too long after Gensler left, they started to be more open in looking into this case. Gensler was running interference. I mean, if you look into Gensler's background, Jim Rickards named him specifically in Aftermath, I think. No, the book before Aftermath, Road to Ruin. He was named specifically in Road to Ruin for looking through long-term capital management's books and taking that information that he had to sign a non-disclosure agreement to look at for Goldman Sachs when he was a partner there or managing director or whatever, and he was trading with Goldman Sachs Capital on that inside information that they got from long-term capital management. I guess he had to sign a non-disclosure agreement to look at it, and they didn't bail out. I don't know if they didn't help long-term capital management raise more capital, but LTCM did get a bailout. And Bear Stearns was the only one who didn't participate. Investigators at the Justice Department and the Commodities Futures Trading Commission are at least 2 years into examination of trading JP Morgan's trading precious metals trade desk. One of the sources for the story said, U.S. authorities have already charged bank traders who worked in New York, London, Singapore with manipulating thousands of orders for gold and silver futures to benefit the bank and its major hedge fund clients. Their campaign of manipulation and spoofing, placing orders and then canceling them to trick other market participants, spanned a decade, prosecutors said. It's more than a decade. Although with high-frequency trading computers, these algorithms, it was easier. The precious metal market manipulation has been going on way longer than a decade. Although other suspected market cheats have been charged with specific spoofing and manipulation offenses, the Justice Department accused JP Morgan metals traders under the so-called RICO statute, a criminal racketeering law more commonly applied to mafia cases than global bank probes. Now, as a libertarian and someone who did go to law school, I didn't graduate law school because I didn't like law school. I didn't want to be a lawyer. There's already way too many lawyers here in the U.S. But for big government, the way RICO is abused, but in this case, I might make an exception because this is probably going to be the only way that the federal government is going to be able to get the banksters is with RICO charges. That was probably going to be the only way. In general, though, if you look at the history of RICO charges, it's really screwed up. They stack tons and tons of felonies against people. One of the recent cases, I can't remember if she was charged with RICO or not, but its charges stacking is actually the celebrity Lori Loughlin. So if she had just pled guilty to, doing that scam to get her daughter into a nice college and all the, the pretense, the college scam, the government would have went fairly lenient on her. I doubt she would have served more than a year in a white-collar prison. She might have even gotten a suspended sentence. But because she fought it, what the government did was they stacked felony upon felony upon felony upon felony upon felony charges against her and her husband for not pleading guilty. And I think they might have even put RICO on her. Can't remember if they did. They put wire fraud on her. So normally wire fraud and RICO, a lot of money evasion stuff go hand in hand. RICO is abused, and the federal government has over a 90 U.S. federal government court system. The government court system has the prosecutors have over a 97% conviction rate, although a lot of those are where people plead guilty because they know the deck is stacked against them because there's so many charges that are brought on them. The RICO is the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, U.S. federal law that provides for extended criminal penalties, civil cause of action for acts performed as part of an ongoing criminal organization. RICO Act focuses specifically on racketeering and allows the leaders of a syndicate to be tried for the crimes they ordered others to do or assisted them in doing. So this applies to JP Morgan metals traders. So if they were told by their middle managers and their senior managers and the heads of the trading division and their bosses, then this can roll up all the way to the top. At least fines. I don't know if everyone's going to prison, but they are going to be collecting some heads here. They've already gotten 6 people, mostly a couple middle manager guys and mostly lower guys, but those guys are going to be testifying in exchange for lesser sentences and or immunity. At least that's normally how the federal government does things with the RICO Mafia testifying. Closing a perceived loophole allowed a person who instructed someone else to, for example, murder, to be exempt from the trial because they did not actually commit the crime personally. RICO was enacted in the Organized Crime Control Act of 1970 and is codified. Okay, blah, 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 blah. If you want to read more about it, I'll put links in the information and description section about the RICO laws. But basically, if you have RICO charges, they are very, very serious. You're totally screwed. Without dropping an F-bomb here, if you have RICO charges against you, you're totally screwed, because normally that means there's multiple felonies against you, including RICO, because they put a bunch of other felonies with the RICO charges. And most people, when they're facing a bunch of felonies and RICO charges, they take whatever deal the prosecution is offering for either immunity or a lesser sentence, because they're looking at going from maybe one charge to 10, 20, 30 counts, a bunch of different charges, and life in prison. So these JP Morgan guys that got busted in the last 12 months, a little more than 12 months for a couple of them, that have pled guilty, looks like they got offered deals. So we'll see what the testimony unveils. But the government is clearly working on a case. This is at least some progress. So I don't think everything's going to get fixed with the paper price manipulation. We had a big smash with the paper price in gold, in US dollars, although it's still pretty strongly above 1,500. The problem, silver is below 18. I mean, it's just ridiculous with silver. But this is actual progress. So Christopher Powell had every right to be skeptical because he's been in this battle longer than pretty much anyone else over at GATA. But this is actually real progress, though. Okay, authorities are conducting a similar racketeering investigation of a second financial firm involving spoofing, according to a third person familiar with the matter. So, not just JP Morgan, another investment bank. Second financial firm, not named yet. RICO allows for prosecutors to charge multiple criminal acts involving a group of people in the same case as long as they were part of the same enterprise. And this is where it starts to get daunting to the defendant, because not only are you facing 1 or 2 charges, but the government prosecutors in the government court system, where the judges rule normally in favor of the government, are stacking all these different felony charges against you. And if you beat the charges, which are very unlikely that you're going to beat the charges, you're going to go bankrupt with your legal defense bills. Your wife's going to leave you, your kids are going to hate you, all these bad things. It's just a vicious cycle. So the government's either going to take the government's not going to directly take your money if you fight it in court, but they're going to drain all your resources in legal bills. A lot of lawyers are parasites. No, we don't know if it's Deutsche Bank. We don't know if the second bank is Deutsche Bank. We have no idea of this. We can only speculate. There was Scotiabank. I think there was a couple other Canadian banks that were named. They were flipping on each other in the last 2 years. There's been rumors of this and stories about this, like minor offenses. So the JP Morgan testimony may have brought heavier charges, or about to bring heavier charges against some of those other larger banks. I think it was like Scotiabank or one of those other ones. Could be HSBC Bank, who's the custodian for GLD. HSBC Bank has been having a lot of problems with their China and Asia divisions. RICO allows for to charge multiple criminal acts involving a group of people in the same case as long as they were part of the same enterprise. Justice Department said the racketeering conspiracy on the JP Morgan Metals desk ran between March 2008 and August 2016. That's most recently because of the high-frequency trading algorithms. The precious paper price manipulation of gold and silver is actually a lot more extensive than just spoofing. Like Bill Murphy of GATA and Chris Powell of GATA have said, that's just the tip of the iceberg. 2 former metals traders for the bank have pleaded guilty to fraud charges and are cooperating with the authorities. Among those fighting charges are Michael Nowak, who remained active as the global head of JP Morgan's precious metals trading desk until he was indicted under seal in August. I believe he also hired a former CFTC attorney to defend him, and I think that attorney at the CFTC might be... Oh no, Michael Nowak is the one on the LBMA. So it's all very incestuous. You have a revolving door here. You have former CFTC lawyers who are now getting paid even more money, who were supposedly investigating the silver manipulation investigation years ago under Gary Gensler. They've left the CFTC, Commodity Futures Trading Commission here in DC, and now they're defending Michael Nowak, or one of them is. After that story came out, I want to say like 4 or 5 months ago, after the arrest of Nowak and 2 others in September, Assistant Attorney General Brian Benskowski said investigators would follow the facts wherever they lead, whether it's across desks here at investment banks or any other bank or upwards into the financial institution. Despite the charges against several individuals over precious metal trading, the Justice Department hasn't announced any criminal charges against the big banks. They're probably waiting to roll up more people for testimony. They're building their case. Again, the blog article that I found from the legal blog article from a successful law firm, Moore and Van Allen, was saying that it is very clear with the government filings from all the arrests of the spoofing traders that the government is building an extensive case. It isn't the first time the bank's trading operations have come under the scrutiny of prosecutors. In 2015, JP Morgan pleaded guilty to felony antitrust charges along with a handful of other global banks that paid penalties and admitted to conspiring to rig the price of US dollars and euros. Also, they rigged LIBOR, London interbank offering rate, and a bunch of other derivatives. I don't think they mention all the different fines here. JP Morgan agreed to pay $550 million, but it and other global banks in the settlement felt little lasting hit from markets or customers, undercutting investor fears that a guilty plea would devastate the business. Even so, federal prosecutors could attempt to use the earlier market manipulation plea as leverage in settlement negotiations if they can argue that the bank is a repeat offender. I would prefer no settlement. Hopefully there is not a settlement. Hopefully more people go to prison. If enough people go to prison with felony charges for enough amount of time, maybe this will stop the banks from doing this. Because if there's only a fine, the banks look at it as cost-benefit analysis. Because if they're paying less than 10% of the fines, less than 10% of their total profits from manipulating a market in fines, then it's worth them doing the market manipulation. So the fines are the problem. Anyway, the fines that these federal government agencies are creating, it's a black hole. The federal government agencies are wasting all the fine money. You don't see the federal government agencies improve from the fine money they collect. I mean, all these fines are massive in total number, not relative to the profits the banks make, but it just goes down the black hole here in Washington, D.C. metro area of waste, fraud, corruption, and abuse too. All the swamp creatures that get their cushy salaries and cushy retirement benefits and cushy Cadillac healthcare. And then they don't actually do a lot of work, a lot of them. Even so, federal prosecutors could attempt to repeat offender in addition to the anti-racketeering statute. Prosecutors are relying on wire fraud laws to target alleged spoofing that occurred before it became specifically outlawed in 2011. Wire fraud, when perpetrated against a financial institution, is subject to a 10-year statute of limitations compared with 5 for spoofing. A federal judge in Chicago recently ruled that the change could be used in a case against 2 former Deutsche Bank traders. JP Morgan has, JP Morgan. Zero Hedge has a response article about this. There was a time when the merest mention of gold manipulation in a reputable media was enough to have one branded, reputables in air quotes, was enough to have one branded a perpetual conspiracy theorist with a tinfoil farm out back, and immediately banned from social media. That was roughly coincident with a time when LIBOR Foreign exchange, mortgage, and bond market manipulation was also considered unthinkable when high-frequency traders were believed to provide liquidity, or when the stock market was said to not be manipulated by the Fed, and when the ever-confused media, always eager to take complicated financial concepts at the face value set by a self-serving establishment, never dared to question anything. So this has now changed. In November 2018, a former JP Morgan trader, precious metal trader, admitted he engaged in a 6-year spoofing scheme that defrauded investors in gold, silver, platinum, and palladium futures contracts. John Edmonds, 36, of Brooklyn, New York, pleaded guilty under seal of indictment in October 9th, District of Connecticut, to commodities fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, commodities price manipulation, and spoofing. And when you add all those charges up together, that's going to be a RICO. So when you start stacking those charges up, especially wire fraud and all these conspiracy charges, it's the RICO's coming. From RICO is, again, RICO's overused in general, but this might be the only way that the government could actually go after this manipulation. So in general, I'm against RICO because it's drastically overused. And the average person, if they get RICO charges against them, they don't have the resources to fight it. So the legal system, there's an immense amount of problems here in the U.S. Unfortunately, it's still better than the legal systems in many other countries. There's too many lawyers and too many lawsuits here, but the legal systems in a lot of other countries with private property and rule of law are pretty bad. November 2018, a former, already read that part, followed a year later, the Department of Justice charging the entire precious metal trading desk at JP Morgan of being deeply involved in what prosecutors described as a, quote, massive multi-year scheme to manipulate the market for precious metals futures contracts and defraud market participants. So this is talking about Michael Nowak, a JP Morgan veteran and former head of its precious metals trading desk, and Greg Smith, another trader on their trading desk. Joking about Blythe Masters omitted. Yeah, she left to go. JP Morgan gave her, I think, $30 million to go start her own cryptocurrency company. Here's what it gets extra interesting. According to Bloomberg, usually aggressive language embraced by prosecutors. It reminds legal experts of indictments utilizing RICO. Prosecutors charged head of JP Morgan's global trading operation, 2 other traders with conspiracy to conduct the affairs of an enterprise involved in interstate or foreign commerce through a pattern of racketeering activity. Language that is typically used to describe RICO. So this is what the legal blog from Moore and Van Allen noticed 2 months ago. That the RICO charges were a lot of RICO were coming. The articles will be in the information and description section if you want to read about this more. But I would say this is another major hurdle. This is a solid victory. I'm hoping it's not just fines. If it's just fines, I'm going to be pissed. Isabella said many more will be Epsteined. Are they gonna take out the whole precious metals trading desk? It's a lot of employees to lose there. So I would say that's unlikely. If they're rolling up this many people, they're treating the bank like it's a banksters and mafia, like it's an organized crime syndicate. Rob, or they can sell some of those hundreds of millions of ounces of silver eagles that they supposedly have to pay back the fines. I got a super chat. Thank you, Gavin, and thank you, Eric. Well, the gold price and silver price in US dollars, the paper price, Eric, is the only ones not at or near all-time highs, which is where all the manipulation is occurring. There is little or no manipulation for the paper gold and paper silver prices in gold and silver and other currencies. It's almost entirely in US dollars. And that's why there's a big differentiation in dollar gold, dollar silver price versus paper prices in other currencies for metals. Tommy says people put up with this. That is what is amazing. Actually, Tommy, most people don't know or care. They're too busy trying to survive, to put food on the table, to pay off their student loan debt if they're trying to be responsible, to pay their credit card bill, to pay rent, to pay their health care. All these prices are going up. And then, of course, there's all the bread and circus, all the distractions. So you have all your celebrity gossip stuff. You have your sports. You have all that stuff. All the different types of bread and circus entertainment designed to distract you from what's really happening. The fact that we've gotten this far and they're even doing RICO, and it looks like these, according to the 2 or 3 sources, that there's going to be more charges against another bank and criminal charges against the bank, I think this is real progress. Now, I'm not saying everything's going to get fixed, but I'm saying this is actually progress. This is legitimately solid progress. Bloomberg's actually talking about the story. That's progress. Trump is actually trying to put some pro-gold people on the Federal Reserve. Judy Shelton and maybe 1 or 2 others. So we'll see about that in the long run. Gavin asks, what are my favorite finance books? Gavin, are you a beginner? How would you describe your financial literacy, your financial education? Are you a beginner? Towards the beginning, intermediate, advanced? I'll look in the live chat for your response, Gavin. If not, just send me an email. Another live chat, another super chat from Tommy. Has Sandstorm Gold been turned into a day trader's pump and dump like Pan American Silver? So I talked about Pan American Silver that I thought it was, in my opinion, that I thought it was a good buy around $10 a share. So it's gone up a lot since March and April of 2019. Sandstorm Gold right now, everything is quiet because there hasn't been a lot of news coming out about the company, and they didn't announce their Q4 2019 earnings yet. The company is I don't want to get into all the details of this because it's like inside baseball stuff and most people don't care, but if you're a publicly traded company, you have to spend a lot of time dealing with regulators and compliance and actually lawyers. It's not as fun running a publicly traded company as you would think. Now, there's high salaries and there is some perks to it. There's financial perks, but there's a ton of paperwork and legal work and dealing with regulators, and it's a lot of things are a bunch of headaches, and one of those is getting the annual report out, and that's because you have to go line by line with the lawyers through the annual report, like word by word, line by line, and that takes up a lot of extra time. So Sandstorm Gold is busy getting that, in my opinion, from talking with the company about this in the past, like right after New Year's and everyone has like their New Year's Eve party or goes on vacation, right after people come back from New Year's Eve and they get back to work. What normally happens is they get to work on the annual report to get it out as soon as possible, and most of the day-to-day business operations for the company, they spend a lot of extra man hours are diverted to getting the annual report out. So the annual report is taking up the majority of time, and that's why the news flow right now is not so good. So I'm not selling any of the stock. If I had more money coming in, I'd probably be buying more stock here on the dips. I bought last around $6.60 a few months ago on a dip. So Sandstorm Gold's going to have a lot of good news in the next like 5 or 6 months probably, and towards the end of the year. There's going to be a lot of good news coming from the company. Going to get updates with Hot Mountain, should have the feasibility study coming out around mid-year. So the feasibility study for Hot Mountain, the project economics should be pretty good. Maybe even better than pretty good. And then you have Agua Rica news. So the feasibility study for Agua Rica, which Sandstorm Gold has a 20% right of first refusal gold stream option on. And that might be actually one of the best, if not the best, gold streams if that was available for bidding in the open market. So they have all the, and then they have the gold stream that should be online hopefully in the next couple months from the Relief Canyon gold stream. And then they have a bunch of warrant money coming in, about $94 million in warrant money that's in the money warrants by the end of the year. So that's a lot of extra money to invest. So there's a lot of good news coming. It's a quiet market, quiet time for the stock right now, in my opinion. So I think it would be a mistake to sell it because of all the good news that should be coming by the end of the year. Plus, you have all this cash flow that's coming in with the gold price and the silver price at these levels. They have the Arizona royalty, which is now 4% per year instead of 3%. And it doesn't sound like it's much more, but their annual cash flow from that royalty, since gold price is above $1,500, their annual cash flow goes from $5 million per year up to $10 million. So that's significant. There should be more deals coming. I think they're working. This is an educated guess. I don't know anything, obviously, but this is just an educated guess. I think they're working on something big, and that's why things are quiet too. So I think they're working on a big deal, but sometimes these deals fall through. But I'm sure they're working on something big. There's a lot of opportunity there. Just because we're at gold prices above 1,500 does not mean that there's a lot of capital available for these gold miners or juniors to raise. So that's why you're seeing, in my opinion, all of these mergers and acquisitions now. And it's because the mid-tier gold producers have the lower costs, the better balance sheets, the better margins with the higher gold price. And they're able to, the mid-tier gold producers are able to go buy companies or assets where the company cannot raise cash or cannot build a mine or is having problems. And the mid-tier gold miners are the ones taking advantage of this. They're getting the quality assets now. So the last, I'm trying to get Nolan Watson on. Again, I was told for another interview, I was told that they don't want to do interviews until after they release the next quarterly earnings report and the annual report. So I have to wait. So I think it's just a quiet market because they're either working on some deals and they're really busy. It wastes a lot of time getting an annual report out. Most people are not aware of that. I know lots of professional investors that don't know that. And that's because I have friends that have worked at publicly traded companies in the investors relations and compliance departments. And it is a pain in the butt to get an annual report out. It takes a lot of company time and resources have to be diverted from doing other things into getting the annual report out. So day-to-day business operations either slow down a lot or stop until the annual report comes out, and then things go back to normal after that. So I hope that answers your question. So the day trade, you're going to see all these day traders and say like, oh, the stock's doing nothing, I'm going to sell it. There's a lot of good news coming as far as I know, looks like later this year. The company has a lot of cash flow coming in. They'll have almost all their debt used on their revolving credit facility paid off from existing cash flows. The Relief Canyon gold stream will be online. Hopefully the Relief Canyon gold stream was delayed. It looks like about 2 months now. So hopefully that'll be online soon, but it's not a big deal if it's delayed. It's not a massive amount of Sandstorm's cash flow projections. That's the good thing about a royalty and streaming company. If there's a delay with a mine, with an asset, with a royalty or stream, and it's not too big of a royalty or stream, it's not a big deal. Now for that individual mining company, if you own shares of America's Gold and Silver, that could be a big deal. The mine's delayed more times for more than 2 months. If it's delayed another couple months, that could be significant. Magic Marker says he works at a Big Four accounting firm. He can vouch for the time to get the 10K out plus complete the audit. Yeah, I have friends who've worked in investor relations departments and compliance. It's a pain in the ass. Yeah, most people think because you work at a publicly traded company that you get all these nice perks and money, and there's not a lot of bad things. The trade-off is you're getting paid a lot of money, but you're working a lot of hours, and then there's a nightmare. Especially if you're the CEO of a publicly traded company for paperwork and dealing with the lawyers. And the securities lawyers have to go... Some people are going to say this is boring, but the securities lawyers have to go through like word by word, line by line of the entire annual report and stuff has to be reworded all the time. It's a real pain in the ass. So no, I don't think there's any problems at Sandstorm Gold. I just think that the amount of news out is slow, and I just said why. But operationally, the business, fundamentally and operationally, the business is generating an enormous amount of cash flow right now. Most of the revolving credit facility should be paid off by the end of the first quarter. And then it's time to, with the extra cash, to go and do another deal. Oh yeah, burnout's high. In the big four accounting firms and the consulting firms here in the DC metro area, the burnout is very, very high. A lot of people burn out in a couple years. They're working over 80 hours a week. Some of them are getting... I knew a girl, she had to get up at like 3 a.m. to deal with like on conference calls to people in India from here. She quit, I think, after like 2 or 3 years. She couldn't deal with it. Silver manipulation is a conspiracy theory, Finance Freak says. No, now it's a conspiracy fact because the government's investigating it. So this just proves it's a conspiracy fact. Kevin says the fraud is so rampant these days and bureaucrats so feckless, it's hard to believe anyone will ever be held accountable. That's the stuff that destroys markets. They're going to throw us a bone. They've arrested some people. Maybe they're going to get a couple higher-ups. They're going to throw us a couple heads. The paper price manipulation could not cap metals prices with gold at 1,200 or below, silver at 14 or 15 or below. The miners were all going to go bankrupt. That's why the metals prices had to rise. And the gold price is actually holding up fairly decently considering what the dollar is doing. The dollar on the dollar index is, let me pull it up, above 98. So the gold price is holding up in US dollars, is holding up fairly well. Tommy gave me another super chat. Yeah, so it's just it's quiet right now for Sandstorm Gold. They didn't announce earnings yet. The annual report's not out. They have to get all that stuff done first. Once the earnings are out and the annual report's out, they can get back to putting most of the time and energy into other things. No, I did not see that the CFTC increased monthly position limits for gold and silver on January 30th. That is interesting. There used to be very strict position limits on the long side. Gold and silver are the only two commodities, I think, where there's strict position limits on the long side. And of course, the shorts, the bullion banks get exemptions because they claim it's for commercial hedging. Okay, Gavin, I don't see Gavin in here telling me his proficiency for reading books. I don't see it in here. His financial literacy proficiency. I don't see him commenting here in the chat section. Okay, you'll have to email me. You can either put the message below the video after on the replay, below the video after it's over. Hey guys, I'm literally about to cross 6 million views in spite of the manipulation, the censorship, I mean. I should be over 6 million views on my YouTube channel in 24 hours. Probably less than 24. Probably after this is over. I remember, I think it was 2015. I think I got my first million views. I think it was like 2014 or 2015. I think it was 2015. Magic Marker, if you want to take, I have some really good analysis on the Kirkland Lake Detour Gold deal. It's behind the paywall on my Patreon account. There's some really good analysis. I looked at a bunch of different articles and read through the financial projections and all the different risks in the deal for both companies are highlighted in that. So $5 a month if you're not already a Patreon account contributor, if you're not one of the 250 people that's already give or take who's a Patreon account contributor, you can sign up there and take a look. There's a lot of upside on that deal for Kirkland Lake Gold, but also a lot of risk, and I outline the risks. What most people can understand the upsides of deals or a mine and the cash flow, but they don't look at the risk properly, and I think that's important. The risks are probably more important to understand. It's easier to do analysis on the rewards because you can do cash flow projections, and you could see that something's trading at a discount of book value, or a discount to net asset value, or a discount relative to peers for a net asset value multiple. It's a lot harder to understand all the different risks of something. I've been doing a lot of China videos for over a year now, and the first 2 videos I've ever had demonetized where there's that stupid yellow dollar sign in there in my YouTube. I took a screenshot of it. So the China bailout video I did, there may be ads running, but I'm not getting a cent of it. So Google and YouTube are collecting all that ad revenue and probably reinvesting into the Chinese government then. But those were the first 2 China videos I've ever had, and I've been making a lot of China videos for a year now. Those are the first 2 ones I've ever had in less than a week now that have been demonetized. What is my opinion on GDX lagging, undervalued relative to gold price? The gold price has been smashed lately, and a lot of people still don't believe in gold. With that being said, a lot of the producing miners for Q1 2020, in my opinion, are going to have very robust margins because you have a situation now where oil has fallen a lot more than the gold price has in dollars. So the margins for Q1 2020 should be, unless these mining companies are running their company very, very horribly, the margins for Q1 2020 should be very, very good. Because the gold price is not down a lot in US dollars, but the oil price is down a lot. And oil and energy input costs make up about a third, 33% give or take, of all the input costs for mining. So there's about 3 major cost variables, I would say, for mining. You have energy input costs, you have labor and materials for building a mine and maintaining the mine, and you have cost of capital. No, Google's in bed with the Chinese government. They've been kissing their butts for years. So is Facebook. I think Google is developing AI systems with the Chinese government. Pretty sure. David asked, do I know where oil might be heading? I've been saying for over 6 months that oil was in a bear market. I do not see any evidence that oil is not out of a bear market. We need to see more bankruptcies first. We need to see the shale oil producers stop producing and increasing their amount of oil production regardless of price. A lot of Google and YouTube employees who are making 6 or 7 figures with stock options and cushy retirement plans and cushy Cadillac healthcare are also like Marxists and socialists. So they're enormous hypocrites. I've met some of them. I actually, in 2016, I got invited to a YouTube creators event. And I got to speak to some YouTube employees, and they pretended to be normal people, that they weren't Ivy League. And then I criticized a couple of them in public, and I haven't gotten invited back. Actually, most of the YouTube creators there were criticizing the YouTube there about demonetizing their videos and not allowing their channel to grow. And the standard company line, the standard bullshit company line for YouTube is that the algorithm changes. The algorithm changes and you don't adapt, and it's your fault. We don't know why your channel is being censored because the algorithm always changes and we know nothing about that. Meanwhile, James O'Keefe of Project Veritas has undercover video, and there were insiders from YouTube and Google proving that human beings do all this crazy stuff with the censorship algorithms. Go watch the Project Veritas James O'Keefe videos from the last year. It's possible Sandstorm Gold. Jay asks if Sandstorm Gold could get bought out. It's possible they could get bought out. Franco-Nevada has the resources to buy them. I don't know if Franco wants to pay the premiums. I think Twitter just shut down James O'Keefe's Twitter. Yeah. I think Twitter just shut down James O'Keefe's Twitter. I mean, they just shut down Zero Hedge's Twitter. Just ridiculous. Zero Hedge needs to file a class action lawsuit. They need to sue the crap out of Twitter. The only thing these large companies fear is bad PR and class action lawsuits. Does Sandstorm Gold still have 97 royalties? No, they have way more than that. It's over 190. Zero Hedge has a new Twitter? I didn't see that. I didn't know they have a new Twitter. Okay, well, my voice is starting to go, so I think I covered all these topics enough. If you want to read up more about the RICO laws, if you're not American and you're not familiar with our injustice system or our illegal system, well, legal system, our corrupt legal system, I think that's probably a better phrase, our corrupt and basically broken, which is still better than a lot of other countries. That's really sad, but true. Legal system, and you want to read up more about the RICO Act, the links to it will be in the information in the description section. Also, that legal blog that I found on December 13th from Moore and Van Allen, where the lawyers talk about the government filings from the precious metal traders that were rolled up. I'll put that in the information in the description section as well. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and thank you very much to the people who pay my bills, the people for my Patreon, PayPal account contributors, people tip me once in a while with cryptocurrencies. I have 6 different cryptocurrencies that I can take. The wallet addresses will be below the video in the information and description section if you want to tip through crypto as well.